The lunch rush had just begun when Lily Carter felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the kind that came from moving too fast. Worrying too? Please subscribe our channel A Story a Day and drop your comment where from you watching our stories. Thank you much and loving someone more than sleep itself. She adjusted the strap of her worn handbag behind the counter, silently counting tips in her head while balancing 3 plates on her arm. Table 7 needed refills. Table 12 wanted the check. And somewhere across town, her 8-month-old son Noah was crying at a daycare that charged more than she could afford. Lily was 24, exhausted and determined. Since Noah's father walked out before the baby was born, she had worked double shifts at Maple Street Diner, smiling through sore feet and sleepless nights. Her manager Brenda tolerated Lily's situation, barely. Every late arrival due to daycare issues earned her a sharp glare. Every phone vibration made Brenda sigh loudly. That afternoon, Lily's phone buzzed again. She ignored it at first, wiping a table clean. But when it buzzed a second time, her heart dropped. She glanced at the screen. Daycare. Emergency. "I'm sorry," Lily whispered, already reaching for the phone. She stepped toward the back hallway, but Brenda intercepted her like a wall. "Absolutely not," Brenda snapped. "You've been warned. No phones during shifts. It's my baby," Lily said, her voice shaking. "Please, just 1 minute." Brenda's lips thinned. "You're fired." The words landed heavier than any tray Lily had ever carried. Fired. Just like that. Customers went quiet. Forks paused midair. Lily stood frozen, cheeks burning, hands trembling as she tried to explain. "I'll fix it. I'll find another sitter. I can work nights. I don't run a daycare," Brenda said loudly. "Take your problems elsewhere." Lily removed her apron with slow, careful movements, fighting tears. She didn't cry often there. Wasn't time for that, but this. Humiliation cut deep. She placed the apron on the counter, whispered "I'm sorry" to no one in particular, and walked out. What Lily didn't know was that someone had been watching. At a corner booth sat Alexander Blackwood, a billionaire tech investor whose name appeared regularly on magazine covers. He had stopped at the diner on a rare day without meetings, craving something simple. He'd seen Lily all afternoon, how she worked harder than anyone, how she smiled despite obvious strain, how her hands shook when she read that message. And he'd heard everything. As Lily pushed open the diner door, blinking back tears, Alexander folded his newspaper slowly. Something about the scene stirred a memory he hadn't visited in years, a woman struggling alone, dismissed for loving her child. He stood up. By the time Lily stepped onto the sidewalk, clutching her phone and wondering how she'd pay rent, she had no idea that the man behind her was about to change her life and expose the cruelty. Lily walked 3 blocks before her legs finally gave out. She sank onto a cold bus stop bench, clutching her phone like it was the only thing keeping her upright. The missed call from the daycare stared back at her. With shaking fingers, she called back immediately. "Miss Carter," the caregiver said gently, "Noah had a fever spike. He's okay, but he wouldn't stop crying. He needs you." "I'm coming," Lily whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'm on my way." She ended the call and stared at the street ahead, panic flooding her chest. Fired meant no paycheck. No paycheck meant rent overdue. Overdue rent meant eviction. She pressed a hand to her mouth, trying to steady her breathing. For a moment, the weight of everything, single motherhood, endless work, constant judgment, felt unbearable. "Excuse me." The voice was calm, deep and unfamiliar. Lily looked up, startled, and saw a tall man in a tailored coat standing a few feet away. He looked out of place on that cracked sidewalk, like someone from a different world entirely. His eyes weren't cold or curious. They were concerned. "I don't mean to intrude," he said, "but I couldn't help noticing what happened inside." Lily wiped her face quickly, embarrassed. "I'm fine," she lied automatically. "Just a bad day." He nodded, as if he understood lies born from survival. "You were fired for answering a call about your child." Her shoulders slumped. There was no point denying it. "Yes, my baby needed me." "That shouldn't cost you your livelihood," he said quietly. She gave a bitter smile. "It does when you're replaceable." The man studied her for a moment, then extended his hand. Alexander Blackwood. The name meant nothing to Lily. Billionaires didn't exist in her world. He was just a stranger who seemed unusually kind. "Lily," she replied softly, shaking his hand. "I really need to go. My son—" "Let me help," Alexander said. She stiffened immediately. "I don't want charity." "I'm not offering pity," he replied. "I'm offering support. There's a difference." Something in his voice, steady, sincere, made her pause. "My driver can take you to your daycare," he continued. After that, I'd like to talk. Only if you're willing. Every instinct told Lily to refuse. She'd learned the hard way that nothing came without strings. But another thought pushed its way through her fear. Noah comes first. She nodded once. Okay, just thank you. The ride to the daycare was silent. Lily stared out the window, watching the city blur past, wondering how her life had derailed so quickly and why this stranger cared at all. At the daycare, Noah reached for her the moment he saw her, his tiny hands clutching her shirt as she held him close. His warmth grounded her. She kissed his forehead, whispering promises she prayed she could keep. When she turned back, Alexander was watching, his expression unreadable, but his eyes were distant, haunted. I grew up with a mother who was punished for choosing her. The daycare smelled of baby powder and disinfectant, a scent Lily had grown to associate with both comfort and fear. She sat on a plastic chair in the corner, Noah asleep against her chest, his tiny fingers curled into her sweater. Alexander stood near the window, speaking quietly to his driver before turning back to her. I don't want to rush you, he said, lowering his voice, but I'd like to understand your situation. Lily hesitated. She wasn't used to being asked, only judged. Still, something about the way he waited, not pressing, made it easier to speak. I work. I raise my son. That's it, she said simply. No family nearby. No backup plan. Alexander nodded. How long were you at the diner? 2 years. Never missed a shift unless Noah was sick. Her jaw tightened. Didn't matter today. No, he agreed. It didn't. He reached into his coat and pulled out a business card, placing it gently on the small table beside her. Black lettering, heavy paper, Blackwood Group. Her breath caught. Even Lily, who barely followed the news, had heard the name. You're that Blackwood? She asked. Yes. Silence stretched between them. Lily's first instinct was to laugh, then panic. People like him didn't stop at diners. They didn't sit in daycare, corners listening to broke waitresses, explain their lives. I don't want a headline, she said quickly. Or a story, or pity. Alexander met her gaze. I wouldn't insult you by offering any of that. He took a seat across from her. I'm opening a new hospitality division. Cafes, small restaurants, community-driven spaces. I need managers who understand real work. People who know what it's like on the floor. Lily blinked. I'm not a manager. You could be, he said calmly. With training, benefits, flexible hours, on-site childcare. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. That sounds unreal. It's very real, he replied. And it comes with a living wage. For a moment, Lily felt dizzy. Hope was dangerous. It crept in quietly, then shattered expectations when you least expected it. She tightened her hold on Noah, grounding herself. Why me? She asked. You could hire anyone. Alexander's eyes softened. Because you didn't beg. You didn't abandon your child. And you kept your dignity even when it was taken from you. Lily swallowed hard. There's one more thing, he added. What happened to you today won't be ignored. What do you mean? The diner, Alexander said. Their employment practices. Their public behavior. A flicker of fear crossed her face. I don't want revenge. Neither do I, he replied. I want accountability. Outside, the afternoon sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the daycare floor. Lily looked down at Noah, his chest rising and falling peacefully, unaware of how close his mother had come to losing everything. I need time, she said quietly. Of course, Alexander replied, standing. Take all the time you need. But the lunch crowd at Maple Street Diner was thicker than usual that Friday. Phones were out. Whispers floated between booths. Brenda sensed it the moment she stepped behind the counter. Something was wrong. A black luxury car pulled up outside. Heads turned. Forks paused mid-air. The diner door opened, and Alexander Blackwood stepped inside, dressed impeccably in a charcoal suit. 2 people followed him, one woman with a tablet, another man carrying a camera bag. The noise in the room dropped to a stunned hush. Brenda's smile snapped into place. Welcome to Maple Street Diner. Table for... I'm not here to eat, Alexander said calmly. The words cut through the room. I'm here about an employee you fired 3 days ago. Lily Carter. A murmur rippled through the diner. Brenda's face tightened. Sir, that's an internal matter. Alexander's assistant tapped on the tablet. Public behavior in a place of business is not internal, especially when it involves discrimination against working mothers. Brenda scoffed nervously. We have rules. So do labor laws, Alexander replied evenly. The cameraman raised his lens, not for spectacle, but documentation. Alexander turned slightly, his voice carrying clearly enough for every customer to hear. Miss Carter was terminated for responding to an emergency call regarding her infant. Witnesses confirm this. Several customers have already provided statements. Color drained from Brenda's face. You humiliated her, Alexander continued. You created a hostile environment. And you violated employment protections. This is absurd, Brenda snapped. She was replaceable. That single word sealed it. Alexander looked around the diner. Did everyone hear that? Silence. Then an elderly woman stood up slowly. I did, she said. And I saw how that girl worked. Harder than anyone. Another customer spoke. Then another. Brenda backed up, her confidence unraveling. Outside, Lily watched through the window, Noah asleep in his stroller beside her. Her hands shook, not from fear but disbelief. She hadn't wanted revenge. She hadn't even wanted justice. Yet here it was. Alexander turned back to Brenda. By the end of today, this incident will be reviewed by the labor board, local press, and every partner associated with this diner. You can't do this, Brenda whispered. I already have, he replied. Within hours, the story exploded online. Waitress fired for answering baby's emergency call. Billionaire steps in. Sponsors pulled out. A formal investigation was launched. Maple Street Diner closed its doors temporarily before sunset. Later that evening, Lily sat in a quiet park as Alexander handed her a folder. Inside was an employment contract, health insurance, childcare support, a salary she'd never imagined earning. I accepted, Lily said softly, tears in her eyes. But not because of this. Alexander nodded. I know. She looked down at Noah, then back up. Because you saw me. He smiled gently. The first morning, Lily walked into Blackwood Cafe. She paused at the door and took a deep breath. The space was nothing like Maple Street Diner. Sunlight poured through. Wide glass windows, soft music hummed in the background. In one corner, behind a clear glass wall, was a small childcare room filled with toys, cribs, and gentle laughter. Noah gurgled happily in her arms, reaching toward the bright colors. You ready for your first day? The childcare coordinator asked warmly. Lily nodded, her throat tight. Handing her son over still felt unfamiliar. But this time there was no fear, only relief. She kissed his forehead and watched as he was settled safely inside. For the first time since becoming a mother, Lily walked to work without dread chasing her steps. Training was intense but respectful. No one shouted, no one mocked her background. Her supervisor explained systems patiently, praised her instincts, and listened when she spoke. Lily realized quickly that the skills she'd learned, surviving double shifts, organization, empathy, speed, were assets here, not weaknesses. During lunch, Alexander stopped by unexpectedly. You're doing well, he said, glancing at the digital dashboard. Lily had organized more efficiently than anyone expected. She smiled shyly. I didn't know I could breathe at work. He studied her for a moment. Most people don't realize how heavy life feels until the weight is lifted. Outside the cafe, news vans came and went. Social media was still buzzing about Maple Street Diner. The owner had issued a public apology. Brenda had been placed on administrative leave. Policies were being rewritten under pressure. But Lily tried not to look back. That evening, she picked up Noah and sat on a bench near the cafe entrance, watching the sky turn orange and pink. She felt tired, but it was a good tired. The kind that came from building something instead of just surviving. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You inspired me to stand up to my boss today. Thank you. Then another. And another. Single mothers, service workers, people who had been told they were replaceable. Tears slipped down Lily's cheeks as she hugged Noah closer. I didn't do anything special, she whispered. I just loved you. Across the street, Alexander watched from his car before pulling away. He didn't need recognition. Seeing Lily reclaim her life was enough. That night, Lily stood in her small apartment, folding tiny clothes, humming softly. The fear that once lived in her chest had quieted. She wasn't rich, she wasn't famous, but she was safe. And tomorrow, she would walk into a job where choosing her child was no longer a crime. For the first time in a long while, Lily allowed herself to plan, not just for survival, but for hope. Just when life began to feel steady, the past knocked hard. Lily was reviewing staff schedules at Blackwood Cafe when her phone lit up with a number she hadn't seen in nearly 2 years. Ethan. Her breath caught. Noah's father. She let it ring, her fingers hovering, heart racing. The name alone pulled her back to nights of broken promises and empty doorways. She told herself to ignore it, but the call came again. And again. Finally, during her break, she answered. Lily, Ethan said, his voice too smooth, too casual. "I heard about you. Saw you on the news." Her jaw tightened. "What do you want?" "I want to see my son." The words landed like ice water. "You disappeared," she said quietly. "You left before he was born." "I made mistakes," Ethan replied quickly. "But things are different now. You've got money, connections, that billionaire guy." "This isn't about money," Lily snapped. "It's about responsibility." There was a pause, then his tone shifted. "I'm his father. I have rights." Lily's hands shook as she ended the call. That evening she sat across from Alexander in his office, Noah asleep in her arms. "I don't want to fight," Lily said, tears in her eyes. "I just want peace for my son." Alexander leaned forward. "Peace sometimes requires preparation." He connected her with a family lawyer, not to attack, but to protect. Custody documents were reviewed. Records of abandonment were gathered. Lily felt sick reading through old messages, reliving years she'd tried to forget. 2 days later, Ethan showed up outside the cafe. Customers whispered. Cameras flashed again. "I just want to talk," he said loudly. Lily stepped outside, her voice steady despite the fear inside her. "You don't get to show up now because life got better." Ethan scoffed. "You owe me a chance." "No," she replied firmly. "My son owes you nothing." Security intervened. Ethan was escorted away. That night Lily lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to Noah breathe. She feared courtrooms, judgments, and men who appeared only when success arrived. The next morning, a letter arrived from Ethan's lawyer. Alexander read it quietly, then looked at Lily. "He's testing you." She straightened her shoulders. "Then he'll learn I'm not afraid anymore." For the first time, Lily understood something deeper than survival or justice. Strength wasn't loud. It was staying calm when old wounds tried to reopen. It was choosing protection over anger. And it was knowing that even if the past returned, it no longer had the power to define her future. The courtroom was smaller than Lily expected. Pale walls, hard benches, a quiet tension that pressed against her chest as she took her seat. Noah safely with a childcare worker outside. She folded her hands together, reminding herself to breathe. Ethan sat across the room, dressed better than she remembered. Confidence painted across his face. He avoided her eyes. The judge entered. Proceedings began. Ethan's lawyer spoke first, painting a picture of a reformed father, seeking involvement, now that he was financially stable. Lily listened in. Disbelief. Stable. The word felt like an insult. When it was her turn, Lily stood. Her voice trembled at first, but only for a moment. "I didn't keep my son from his father," she said clearly. "His father left. He never called, never visited, never sent support. I worked 2 jobs. I slept 3 hours a night. I chose my child every day." The judge reviewed records, messages, absence. Silence followed. "Mr. Hayes," the judge said at last, "parenthood is not activated by convenience." Ethan's expression cracked. Full custody was granted to Lily. Supervised visitation. Conditional, earned, not assumed. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered again. Lily shielded her eyes from the cameras, but this time she didn't feel small. "I'm not a headline," she said simply. "I'm a mother." At Blackwood Cafe that afternoon, the staff applauded when she walked in. Someone placed a small handwritten sign near the counter. "Parents are not a weakness." Lily smiled through tears. That evening, Alexander visited the cafe quietly after closing. "You were brave today." She shook her head. "I was honest." "That's braver." As the cafe lights dimmed, Lily held Noah close, rocking him gently. The fear that once ruled her choices was gone. In its place was something steadier. Confidence. She hadn't become powerful because a billionaire noticed her. She became powerful the moment she stopped apologizing for being a mother. And now, the world was starting to listen. The cafe was busier than ever. But the noise felt different now, lighter, hopeful. Customers didn't just come for coffee. They came for the story. Lily noticed it in the way people smiled at her. The way working parents lingered a little longer, sharing quiet nods of understanding. One morning, a young waitress named Mia approached Lily, eyes nervous. "My manager fired me last year when I got pregnant," Mia said softly. "Watching you? It made me apply here." Lily felt her chest tighten. "You're safe here," she said without hesitation. Soon applications poured in. Single parents, caregivers, people who had been pushed out of jobs for choosing family. Blackwood Cafe became more than a business. It became a symbol. Alexander invited Lily to attend a private meeting with investors and policymakers. She almost refused, rooms full of suits still. Made her uneasy, but she went for Noah. Standing behind a podium, Lily looked out at the faces waiting for polished speeches and corporate language. "I'm not an activist," she began. "I'm a waitress who loved her child." The room fell silent. I didn't need saving. I needed fairness. And millions of parents like me are punished every day for emergencies they can't control. By the time she finished, several people were wiping their eyes. Within weeks, new workplace initiatives were announced: flexible scheduling, emergency childcare partnerships, protected parental call policies. Not everywhere, not perfectly, but enough to matter. One afternoon, Lily returned to the old bus stop where she'd once sat. Terrified and unemployed, she watched people pass by, unaware of how close their lives were to changing in a single moment. Alexander joined her quietly. "You changed more than one diner." Lily smiled. "So did you." He shook his head. "I only opened a door. You walked through it." As the sun dipped low, Lily checked her phone. A message from Maple Street Diner's former owner appeared. "I'm sorry. We were wrong." She read it once, then put the phone away. Some apologies didn't need answers. That night, Lily tucked Noah into his crib, brushing her fingers through his soft hair. "Your world will be kinder," she whispered. "Because we asked it to be." Outside, the city hummed, busy, imperfect, alive. And somewhere within it, countless parents stood a little straighter, knowing their love was no longer something to hide. The invitation arrived in a thick cream envelope, embossed with gold lettering. Lily stared at it for a long moment before opening it. Blackwood Group, Executive Board Appointment Consideration. Her hands trembled, not from fear this time, but from disbelief. That evening, after closing the cafe, Lily sat across from Alexander in his office, the city lights glowing behind him. "They want you on the board," he said simply. Lily let out a quiet laugh. "I don't belong in rooms like that." Alexander leaned back. "You already changed those rooms. This would just make it official." She looked down at the folder. The salary, the influence, the power to protect people like her. It was everything she'd never imagined asking for, but it came with long hours, travel, distance. She thought of Noah, of daycare pickups, of bedtime stories and quiet evenings. "I won't disappear from my son's life," she said firmly. Alexander nodded. "Then don't. We can redesign the role." That word, redesign, stuck with her. A week later, Lily stood in front of the cafe staff. "I'm not leaving," she said, "but I am growing." She accepted a hybrid leadership role: part-time board advisor, full-time mother, cafe director by choice, not obligation. The news spread quickly. Commentators called it revolutionary. Lily called it necessary. One afternoon, she received a handwritten letter from a woman in another city. "I quit a job that punished me for being a mom. I start at a place that values me next week." Lily pressed the letter to her chest. At home that night, she sat on the floor building blocks with Noah, laughing as he knocked them down. She hadn't chased power. She had protected love. And somehow, that had given her both. As the moon rose outside the window, Lily realized the most shocking thing of all wasn't what the billionaire had done. It was what she had chosen to become when the chance arrived. The grand opening of the 5th Blackwood Cafe arrived quietly. Without the chaos Lily once associated with moments that mattered. There were no television crews crowding the sidewalk, no speeches echoing through loudspeakers, no red ribbons stretched across doors. Instead, there was warmth, soft morning light spilling through wide windows, the smell of fresh bread, and the gentle sound of children laughing from the childcare room. Lily stood near the entrance with Noah balanced on her hip, greeting the first customers as they walked in. He was almost a year old now, curious and bright-eyed, tugging playfully at her necklace. She smiled at him, pressing a kiss to his cheek, before handing him to the childcare coordinator she trusted completely. As Noah disappeared behind the glass wall, Lily felt a familiar tug in her chest, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was pride. Parents filled the cafe slowly, mothers with strollers, fathers holding tiny hands, couples taking turns sipping coffee while one rocked a baby. No one looked rushed. No one looked afraid to glance at their phone. This was the vision Lily had fought for, often without realizing it. She moved between tables, not as a waitress this time, but as a leader who still remembered every step of the floor. She listened when staff spoke. She laughed when children spilled juice. She noticed everything, because she had once been invisible. A young man hesitated near the counter, his hands clasped tightly. "Ms. Carter?" he asked. "Please," Lily said gently. "Just Lily. My wife works here," he continued. "She was let go from her last job after maternity leave. She cried every night for months." His voice cracked. "Now she comes home smiling. I just wanted to say, thank you." Lily swallowed hard. "She earned that smile," she replied. We just made room for it. He nodded, wiping his eyes before walking away. Across the cafe, Alexander Blackwood stood quietly near the back, observing without interrupting. He hadn't announced his arrival. He rarely did anymore. Watching Lily move through the space, confident, calm, grounded, felt more rewarding than any deal he'd ever closed. He remembered the woman he'd first seen at Maple Street Diner, shoulders hunched, eyes tired, dignity under attack. What stood before him now was the same woman, and yet entirely transformed. Not by money, not by influence, but by being allowed to remain whole. As the morning rush eased, Lily stepped outside for a moment, letting the autumn air brush her face. She leaned against the brick wall, breathing deeply. For years, breathing had felt like something she had to earn. After shifts, after tears, after fear. Now it came naturally. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I was fired today for leaving work when my son had an asthma attack. I saw your story last year. I reported them. Thank you for giving me courage. Lily closed her eyes, letting the weight of it settle. Courage. She'd never felt courageous. At the bus stop that day, she'd felt broken, desperate, small. But courage, she was learning, often looked like showing up anyway. Inside the cafe, applause broke out suddenly. Lily turned, startled, as her staff gathered near the counter. Smiling and clapping, one of them held up a small sign written in marker. Parents are not a liability. Lily laughed through tears as she stepped back inside. You didn't have to do that, she said. Yes, we did, Mia replied, the young waitress who had once been fired for getting pregnant. You made this place feel like family. Family. The word settled deep in Lily's chest. That evening, after closing, Lily sat alone at a corner table, reviewing schedules for the following week. She still loved this part, the quiet order of planning, the sense of control after years of chaos. Alexander joined her, pulling out a chair. You didn't miss a thing, he said softly. She smiled. I didn't want to. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. You know, Alexander continued, people still say this all started because a billionaire intervened. Lily looked up. And you hate that? I do, he admitted, because it erases the truth. She tilted her head, which is, that nothing would have changed if you hadn't stood your ground, he said. I saw injustice, but you lived it and survived it. Lily thought back to the moment she'd been fired, the heat in her face, the shame, the urge to apologize for something that wasn't wrong. I didn't feel strong, she said quietly. Most people never do, Alexander replied. Strength usually looks like endurance before it looks like victory. Later that night, Lily returned home, the apartment warm and softly lit. She bathed Noah, giggling as he splashed water everywhere, then wrapped him in a towel and carried him to his crib. As she rocked him gently, memories flooded back, the nights she'd cried silently so he wouldn't hear. The fear of eviction notices, the constant calculations of time and money. She leaned down and whispered, You were never the problem. Noah yawned, his tiny fingers brushing her cheek before he drifted off to sleep. Lily sat beside the crib long after, watching him breathe. Weeks turned into months. Other companies began adopting similar policies. Not all, not everywhere, but enough to create cracks in a system that had punished care for generations. Lily received invitations to speak, but she chose carefully. She didn't want to become a symbol detached from reality. When she did speak, she told the truth plainly. I wasn't brave, she'd say. I was backed into a corner. And when that happens to enough people, change becomes unavoidable. One afternoon, a letter arrived bearing a familiar return address. Maple Street Diner. Lily hesitated before opening it. Inside was a handwritten apology from the owner. Not polished, not defensive. We were wrong. We lost good people because we forgot they were human. Lily read it once, then placed it in a drawer. Forgiveness didn't require reopening wounds. Some things were lessons, not destinations. On the anniversary of her firing, Lily returned briefly to the bus stop where everything had fallen apart. She stood there, watching traffic pass, parents rushing by, unaware of how fragile their balance could be. She imagined her past self sitting there, phone shaking in her hands, heart pounding, future collapsing. I see you, Lily whispered. And then she walked away. That evening, Blackwood Cafe hosted a small gathering. Staff, families, children running freely between tables. There were no speeches, just laughter, shared food, and a feeling of belonging. Alexander raised a glass quietly. To Lily, he said simply, for reminding us that profit means nothing without people. Cheers filled the room. Lily shook her head, smiling. To all of us, she corrected. For choosing not to look away. As the night wound down, Lily stepped outside, the city lights glowing softly. She held Noah close, his head resting against her shoulder. The world wasn't perfect. Parents were still punished. Systems still failed. But something undeniable had shifted. Not because a billionaire had power, but because a waitress refused to be ashamed of loving her child. And when kindness finally met courage, neither backed down.